Okay, if you test your transmission out before you install it, make sure it shifts right. And after you get it installed, all of a sudden it's stuck in neutral. And what happened was you bumped this in about 3/8 of an inch while it's in neutral. That gear moved back. I don't know if you're paying attention or not. But now it won't shift. The only way to get it shift again is to remove this 17mm plug. Put this big screwdriver in there. Push that gear forward. Now it'll shift again. It only seems to do it when it's in neutral. Okay, another common problem is when people go to change their oil on their transmission, they remove this plug. And you can't remove that plug because that controls this mechanism here for going between fifth and reverse. And there's a pin on the end of that plug. So if you pull it out and you see that pin on the end, and then if you shift the gears or move the tranny around, it moves that thing out of alignment. So what you got to do is stick a screwdriver in this hole and make sure that U fork is lined up, and then put that thing back in there. Now, the proper way to fill your transmission, well, first thing you got to drain it. So to drain it, remove this plug here. There's another plug back here. Before you do it, loosen this 19mm bolt. Loosen it 8 full turns. And that allows all the fluid to come out, and then when you're refilling, you also want to leave that out. So when you're refilling, you want to refill through the plug that's here, and make sure that thing is 8 turns out. Otherwise there's a chamber in there, it doesn't get filled, and you'll think you have it full, but you're short a little bit. Another handy thing to know is when you're installing and removing this transmission, pull this input shaft out first before you remove it, and put it in after you put the transmission back in. It makes things go a lot easier. There's a plate, got 4 bolts in it. And when you remove it, you can pry this thing out. Sometimes it's a little hard to get out. I'll clamp a vice grip on this, what little you can get on here, and wiggle it to get it out. Okay, there's a seal that goes here that's not, I've removed it, but I want to talk about this bearing right here. When you have a noisy transmission while it's idling, and you push in the clutch, and all of a sudden it gets quiet, that's probably that bearing. When you're sitting there idling with the clutch out, this shaft is spinning. And when you push in the clutch, it stops. So that tells you that bearing is bad because the noise will stop. It's a good idea to replace that bearing as soon as you hear that sound, because when things start going bad in here, eventually it'll ruin this part of the bearing surface, and you can get a machinist to turn this down and put a sleeve over it, and then turn the sleeve until you get the correct diameter. It cost me about 85 bucks when I had it done. Okay, if you're running your transmission low on oil, what usually happens is this bearing gets starved because it's at the highest point, and that's the bearing that goes bad first. So you want to check your level periodically. If you see any sign of leaks under your transmission, it smells like gear oil, top it off. Okay, this is 5th gear, and if you run it low on oil too long, usually 5th gear will go out first, and what it does is the teeth will get so hot they lose their temper, I guess, and they fall off. I've seen it where these 2 gears are just a melted blobs of metal. The other thing I've seen go wrong with 5th gear is this clip gets damaged in here, and this moves back and forth a little bit, and it messes up the clip that holds that thing on. It's kind of rare. The transmission's making grinding sounds and noise. It's either this bearing probably or this bearing. It's going bad. And if you can get the transmission out before that bearing totally falls apart, you can save the transmission. But if you wait until either one of these gears falls apart, pieces get in between these two gears and ruin this big idler gear and this input shaft gear. And they're hard to come by. Both of these bearings are available online. Okay, another thing is a sloppy shifter. Your shifter's starting to feel a little sloppy. It's probably because the plastic cup that's on the end of the shifter is falling off. Here's the plastic cup. Happens is this thing goes bad. This thing goes bad right here. You can see water gets in, gets down in there and kind of eats things up. So it's a good idea to check this once in a while. Lubricate this up really good with grease. Put a new cup on it. Another thing that goes wrong is when water gets in here, this pin gets rusty and eventually gets stuck. That's another thing to keep an eye out. You can get it off. It takes a pretty big open end wrench, I think 1 1/16" wrench to get it off. And you can fix them by drilling a hole in the end, squirting oil in there, and then put a pin in there. You can knock that thing forward, that piston, and push it back and forth. And then when you're done, I use a 3/16 drill bit, and then when I'm done I tap it out for a 1/4 20 and just put a 1/4 20 short screw in there to seal it off.